Perfect. So it looks like we're recording. So we're here at Mothers Illuminated with Melissa from the Communication Doc. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does and, how her journey ended up getting there. So Melissa, welcome. And let's start off with, kind of what you do and how that journey, how you went from just being a mom or whatever your situation was to what you do now.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. I appreciate you having me on. I'll start at the beginning of the journey because I think that
Mhm.
makes the most sense. So, when I was in high school, I was always one of those people that everybody came to with problems. And so I thought, well, when I graduated high school, I'd go get a degree in psychology so I could do counseling. And I did end up getting my bachelor's degree in psychology. But while I was doing that, I took a course in interpersonal communication, which is all about communicating in relationships, and I loved it. So
Mhm.
whereas psychology is a little more theoretical, communication is very practical, but the 2 are interrelated because obviously we know what's going on in a person's mind by what they say and what they do. And
Mm.
so a lot of the theories, etcetera, overlap and connect, but
Mhm.
communication is very practical. So that's what I ended up getting my master's and my PhD in over the next number of years. And all the time I was wanting to get married and have kids, and it just didn't happen. I didn't find the right one. And once
Mhm.
I'd finally finished my doctorate, I got back in contact with actually a friend from high school. We had met in ninth grade, and he had a crush on me, and I wasn't interested in him at the time. But his route went one direction and my route went the other direction, and we ended up coming back together, and at that time, he had already been married twice, divorced twice, and had 5 children. I
Oh,
had
wow.
not
Yeah.
been married and had done the education route and,
Mhm.
so very, very different lives.
Mhm.
And, of course, I'm thinking, "I'm crazy. I've stayed single this long. Why am I getting involved in a relationship like this?" But I did, and so from the time I got married, I had to start implementing all those things that I had learned about how to communicate in relationships. Now, I think I'm a good communicator regardless, but obviously I hadn't been in marriage to apply the communication skills specifically to that.
Mhm.
Well, from the time we were married, I was also an instant mom. 3 of the children stayed with us every other week. And, the 2 oldest girls were mostly with their mom and only came when they wanted, and then about 2 years after we were married, we had child number 6,
Mhm.
and that added another dynamic, and then about 5 years into our marriage, the mother of the middle 3 that we had split custody with had remarried. Her husband shot himself and
Oh
shot
my
her
God.
and then shot himself,
Wow.
and so yeah.
That's
Yeah,
quite a
that's the
story.
day when I got that phone call. The kids were actually with their mom that week. She had sent them on the bus to school, thankfully,
Mhm.
and then everything happened. So the kids moved in with us full time, but obviously under some very uh, hard circumstances. And then
Yeah.
from that point, we're trying to figure out, how do we deal with grieving children? They were 16, um, 14, and 11 at the time.
Wow. That's such a tough age in itself.
It is, and it would have been one thing um, if their mom had not been in the picture from the beginning and I had been able to step in
Mhm.
and kind of be their mom, but because their mom was from the time that we were married, I was always very careful. I loved them. I did the best I could to provide for them, but I was always very careful not to step over those lines and try to become their mom because I didn't want to create conflict. But by the
Yeah.
time all of this happened and it was like I couldn't. It was too late to become their mom, and so that was a
Mhm.
very difficult road to navigate. So at the same time all of this is going on, I when I had graduated with my PhD, I had started teaching at a small private Christian college, and this was
Mhm.
my perfect job. So I got to pick whatever schedule I wanted. I should add, I'm visually impaired. I've been legally blind since I was 10, and
Mhm.
so I can't drive. I've never been able to drive. And so that flexibility in scheduling was really important for me so I could find rides to work
Mhm.
Once we got married, my husband had to take the kids to school in a different city and worked in a different city. So for me to be able to find rides was really important.
Mhm.
And I was able to um, be involved in drama, which I also have a background in. I helped with plays. I had a drama club. The kids were on campus with me a lot. My husband would bring them and we would eat together on Monday nights. And then when my youngest was born, he was pretty much the campus baby. So he was with me in faculty meetings and my husband proposed to me on campus. We had our wedding reception on campus. So it was not just a job, it was really a huge part of our lives.
Yeah.
Well, then in 2015, it closed suddenly. No hint of there being any issue. We get a call in June saying, "You need to come in for a meeting." And at that meeting, they said, "We're closing," after being open for 50 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, that was a huge adjustment. I mean, if they were still open, I would probably still be there. I would be doing the same thing. I would be
Mhm.
loving my job. It was so flexible that it allowed me to be a mom and
Mm.
still be at home with my kids and, have that flexibility. So I didn't have to give up the whole idea of being a mom and being there for the kids despite all the circumstances. But
Yeah.
when that closed, and then I was left trying to figure out what else to do. Well, for a while I thought about just being a stay-at-home mom. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what your desire is. And I'd always wanted to have kids, so I would say that is my desire. But I've come to realize in the intervening 10 years since the college where I taught closed,
Mm.
because I was single for so long, my work and my career, and because I put so much effort into it too, it wasn't exactly easy for me being legally blind to get a PhD, right?
Yeah.
So so I put a lot of effort into this, and I love teaching communication, and so for me not to be able to use my talents and my career in a way that was fulfilling to me really left me at least partly empty, right?
Mm.
Not completely, because I do have my family, I have my kids, I have grandkids now,
Yeah.
but definitely a void. Um,
Mm.
so in the years I've since then, I've tried to find full-time work. I haven't found anything that really worked in my life with the demands of my schedule and not being able to drive. I've been
Mhm.
teaching adjunct, which for people who don't know, adjunct basically just means whatever our full-time faculty can't do and is left over, we'll give you, and we're not gonna pay you nearly as much, and we can't guarantee
Oh,
you're
no.
gonna have anything from semester to semester.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I've been doing, and it's been nice to have some extra income as it comes, but I am in no control. So I have no
Mm.
control over the courses I teach, whether or not I teach, whether I have courses, which courses I teach, how I teach them, which books I use, etc. And I'm tired of that.
Mm.
To be quite frank, after 30 years of teaching college, I'm tired of grading papers.
Yeah.
So
I
a
can
few years
understand how
ago,
that would be tiring.
well, and I know it's important for the educational system, but I've been doing it for so long now. I really just want to be able to do what I love and teach it and do it on my terms.
Mm.
And so that's what led me to start my business, which is the communication doc. And as I was thinking about where do I really want to focus on helping people, what should my niche be? I thought about married couples. Um,
Mm.
we always say that 50% of American marriages, excuse me, end in divorce. It's
Mhm.
it's about 35 to 40 for first marriages, like 65 for second, and almost 75 for third marriages. So
Wow.
that's what averages to that 50%. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot of families that are being torn apart. And
Mhm.
and I really believe that the family is the foundation of society. So when we
Mhm.
have families, we have marriages that are falling apart, families fall apart, society falls apart. If we can get the marriages to be healthy and strong, that's going to strengthen the families and that's going to strengthen society.
Mhm.
And 67% of couples that go to counseling say that they're going to counseling because of communication problems.
Mm.
I don't think all of those problems are really communication. there can be deeper problems like intimacy issues or problems with parenting or problems with finances. But if you can't communicate about those problems, you can't resolve them.
Mm.
Vice
Yeah.
versa, whatever problems you face, if you can communicate about those, well, then you're probably going to be able to resolve them or at least come to some kind of agreement.
Yeah.
So that's what's led me to this point where I am now. I'm starting my own business. I'm brand new. I just formed my business in June. I just got my website domain settled as of about a month ago. So this is all new. I'm trying to get the word out. I don't have background or experience in running a business, so I'm having
Mhm.
to learn a lot on that side. I have experience in counseling, but it's really most of my training is all really in teaching, training, coaching.
Mhm.
I'm very practical because I can teach you all kinds of things, but if I don't teach you how to use it to make a difference in your life, I've accomplished nothing. So
Mm.
my business is a training coaching business, not a counseling therapy business. I'm not
Okay.
going to dig into the deep dark issues of people's past. If they need help with that, I would send them to a counselor or therapist. But every counselor or therapist who sees a married couple is going to tell them they need to work on their communication. And most of those counselors and
Mm.
therapists are not experts in communication. So
Yeah.
that's what I can help with. If you're a committed married couple, you want to make your marriage work, but you have a lot of conflict, you argue a lot, you feel like you don't understand each other, you feel like you can't communicate clearly, you feel like the connection you once had is no longer there. Those are all
Mhm.
things that communication can fix. And I
Yeah.
can teach people how to do that. So, I know I've talked a lot, but I wanna that's where I am at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously we want you to talk. That's why we're here at the podcast. So yeah, feel free to, talk as much as you want. And I was going to ask, so, communication and bringing it back to marriages, like you said, communication is, I believe, the biggest issue because exactly what you said, if there's other issues that come up, if you can't communicate about it, you can't move forward, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of the times, yeah, I think the root of most divorces is divorce or is communication issues. So what would you say are kind of the biggest things that you see couples doing that are big, like communication no-nos?
Okay. Well, as I was thinking about developing the program that I've developed now, I was
Mhm.
trying to identify what are the top if I had to identify what are the top issues, they would be misunderstanding.
Mhm.
So, I don't really understand my spouse, and there can be a number of things that play into that. Obviously, cultural background, just background, family background can play into how people communicate differently. Gender
Mhm.
plays a big difference, a big role in that, and I do a lot with gender differences and thinking and communication. So, the misunderstanding my spouse, I don't really understand how my spouse thinks, and so therefore I don't communicate with them well or get how they communicate with me. So the thinking component and then, miscommunication. So even if I understand my spouse, I still have to get the messages out in a way that are going to be clear, both verbally and non-verbally, and
Mhm.
miscommunication can happen so easily for a variety of reasons. Some of them being as simple as, I don't take time to think before I speak,
Mm.
and therefore
Yeah.
I say things that I really shouldn't say, or especially when we're in conflict, I am emotional, and so I lash out and say things that are hurtful and create defensiveness rather than leaving it opportunity for an open discussion that will allow me to resolve the conflict. So, understanding your spouse, communicating effectively, and then the third one would be listening, right? We as a general rule, especially here in America, we tend not to be
Mhm.
super good listeners.
Yeah.
We focus a lot on ourselves, so as we're
Mhm.
listening, we start thinking about what we wanna say next and often interrupt, don't hear out a person, that creates frustration, anger, misunderstanding. So, improving those listening skills, understanding how you listen, um, to be able to make changes in your style of listening to be able to adapt to different situations. And then when those 3 are bad, for lack of a better word, when we're not skilled at those 3 things, well, then we have more conflict, right? So
Mhm.
by contrast, if I can improve those 3 things, I'm gonna have less conflict. I'm still
Mhm.
gonna have conflict. I mean, we're married, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
anybody who's been married can tell you that happily ever after is not true. That is
Yeah.
a lie. You don't get married and all of a sudden everything's magical and just works out great. You've got 2 very different people who are now trying to intertwine their lives, and there's gonna be
Mhm.
conflict, there's gonna be problems, and then you add to that children, jobs, family influences, other stressors of life, and there's going to be conflict. But a lot of our conflict, I venture to say about 50% of conflict in marriage is due to some of these other communication issues. So if those can be fixed, we've already cut our conflict in half.
Mhm.
But then I can also teach couples how to communicate correctly to resolve conflict, which
Mm.
will reduce again the conflict that you have, you'll be able to resolve it more effectively. And then the
Yeah.
last component that I've built into my program is the connection component, because again, in our busy, stressful lives, sometimes our marriages get put on the back burner. They
Mhm.
they are no longer a priority and everything else becomes a priority, especially children. We
Mm.
invest so much in our children, and I know that's necessary, but almost to the exclusion of our marriages, and that's what happens then a lot of times when the children are out of the house and the parents are down to empty nest, they get divorced
Mm.
because for the past 18, 20 years, they've done nothing but invest in their children, and there's nothing left of their marriage for them to
Mm.
want to maintain it. So it's important to keep that intimacy, keep that connection with your spouse, even when you're busy, so that you can have something left when the kids are gone, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the major issues I've identified.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed at least is a lot of kind of like identifying your triggers. And it's to me, it's in all relationships, whether it's your relationship with your spouse or your children, and just being able to identify those triggers and realize like, wait, let me take a step back. I'm feeling all this flood of, anger or overwhelm or whatever I'm feeling. And like, is this appropriately placed? Because I think a lot of times we kind of tend to do life and just be like, oh, we have to keep going, keep going, keep going. And we push down all these different feelings. And then just something kind of happens that makes us explode. And I think, like, in your experience with working with couples and talking to different people and knowing communication, um, is that kind of like a part of your program? And kind of what would you help with people who need to be able to, like you said, think about what you're going to say before you say it, right?
Mhm.
And being more intentional with communication.
Right. Well, there's of course some simple things you can do. I never recommend trying to deal with a conflict right away, especially if you're very
Mhm.
emotional, because by nature emotions take thinking out of the picture.
Mhm.
And so it's very hard when we're overly emotional to be able to stop and think clearly about the situation. We're more likely to react as opposed to being able to
Mhm.
choose to act in a way that's going to be conducive to resolving the conflict. So taking time apart, but also the whole idea of you tend to have 2 extremes with conflict. You have those people who clam up, like you mentioned, and kind of push everything down until there's an
Mhm.
explosion. And then you have those people who blow up and are overly angry. So the overly angry, reactive people need to take some time to calm down. But the people who tuck everything away inside until they just can't handle it anymore, I'm actually gonna be launching a mini course that December 1st in time for the holidays that's called One Simple Truth to Sustain Your Marriage Through Holiday Stress.
Mm.
And, the truth is the truth, so it's a little bit of a play on words.
Mhm.
But one of the ways in which we are often untruthful with ourselves is in conflict, where
Mhm.
we try to, avoid or ignore the fact that there's a conflict that we need to resolve. And that's that, you know, tucking it down inside there, or
Mhm.
there's a term called gunny sacking, where you throw it in the gunny sack that's hanging on your
Oh
shoulder.
yeah. Yeah.
And when you do that, you're not being honest with yourself. You're not being
Mm.
honest in your marriage because you're ignoring the fact that there's a problem, thinking that, "Oh, there's a problem. Okay, but, if I just ignore it, it'll go away." Well, no, it
Yeah.
won't.
Yeah.
And so in this mini course, I address some specific things that you need to do to determine, is this a conflict that needs to be addressed? And then if yes, being honest with yourself, if yes, then how?
Mhm.
How can I address this conflict in a way that is truthful so that I can manage it more effectively? Because that's the other thing we do in conflict. A lot of times we're not truthful in how we address it because we blame our spouse for everything, or
Mm.
we attack our spouse's personality or character as opposed to whatever the issue was that led to the conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like so obviously I'm connected to a lot of different moms, I'm a mom of 4 and I know lots of moms out there and I feel like that tends to be the biggest one that they struggle with, which is again, it's like just trying to avoid the conflict and get on with your day. But then it ends up becoming this big thing, or the other one that I hear a lot is like, oh, well, I talked to my husband or oh, I've already tried telling him about this. He doesn't listen or things like that. I hear that a lot too. And I'm like, well, but how are you talking about it, right? I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing that I always try is like, how are you really
Well,
approaching
and
it with them?
timing is really a big issue,
Mhm.
right? So, one of the differences between men and women is that men tend to need time to think about a conflict to be ready to discuss it.
Mm.
So a lot of time, and the other component of this is, and this is a very frustrating component for us as women, they also
Mhm.
think in compartments. So they can move themselves out of that conflict box with you into a different compartment like work or sleep or watching
Yeah.
football and not think about the conflict at all.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, because everything's interconnected in our minds like spaghetti. So because of
Yeah.
that, everything we do is gonna bring us back to that conflict. Something
Mhm.
happens with the kids, and it's gonna remind you of the conflict you have with your spouse.
Right,
Something
yeah.
happens at your work, it's gonna remind you. So for us, it's like it's always on our mind, it's always impacting everything we do, but it's not that
Mm.
way for men. But they
Yeah.
need time to think about and figure out what happened, how to address it before they're ready to address it. And I can't tell you
Mhm.
it's a certain amount of time. It's gonna vary
Yeah.
person to person. So, because it so impacts us, we want to address it right away, right? So if you
Mhm.
try to go to your husband and say, "Okay, we need to deal with this conflict," and even if you deal with it in the right way, he may not have had enough time to process it in order to
Mhm.
be ready to deal with it. So, it may be where you say, "This is a problem. We need to talk about this conflict.
Mhm.
Can you please take some time and think about it, and let's plan to talk about it. Can we plan to talk about it tomorrow, before
Mhm.
bed or in the morning when we get up or whatever is the time that you would be able to talk." And then that
Yeah.
kind of gives time to think about and work on it so that he's ready to be able to approach a conflict as opposed to if you just approach it with him and he's not ready, you feel like he doesn't want to resolve the conflict when that's really not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And then I know we had talked a little bit about how, you're a Christian mom as well. And I'm assuming, do you bring a lot of that into your business and kind of how is that incorporated into what you do?
So I am a Christian and I have been since I was very young. My beliefs, I believe the Bible tells us everything we need to live our lives. And
Mhm.
I that underlies everything I do. That's
Mhm.
actually one of the reasons why I decided I wanted to go into communication as opposed to psychology. Whereas psychology can be very theoretical and can delve into a lot of theories that would go opposite to what I would believe as a Christian.
Mhm.
Communication is very concrete, and
Mhm.
I have studied what the Bible says about communication in marriage, and I can teach it from a biblical perspective and give you verses to everything, but I can also teach it without putting the verses to it, and it's gonna be the same exact thing.
Mhm.
So I've been teaching now for 30 years, about 20, 22 of those I taught in Christian colleges where everything was,
Mhm.
this is the verse behind this, and then the last, 8 years I've taught in secular colleges where I can't do that,
Mm.
but my content is the same. So my program is not exclusively Christian in the sense that I want people who need help with their marriage to come and get help.
Yeah. Yeah.
but I definitely everything I do is undergirded by the foundation of what the Bible says. There's nothing that I
Mm,
teach or would ever advise that would go
mhm.
against what the Bible would teach. And of course, if it happens to be that I have all Christians in a particular group, I have the opportunity then to add in that content.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So I'm a Christian mom too. So I'm always like, what are the verses that back these things up? Because I
Mhm.
love that. We are going to take a small, like 2-second break. I'm just gonna um, stop everything in the microphone and the video. Just because I've got little children over there that are like fighting over toys. So I just have to go break that up real
Yeah.
quick and I'll be
Can
right
you
back.
hear my son upstairs yelling?
No, no, I was gonna say, I don't know if you're
Okay.
hearing my kids fighting over there, but I'm gonna go stop it anyway, just in case.
No worries.
All right, sorry about that.
No, no worries. I
As I
actually
say,
ran
any of
upstairs
my
and told my
listeners
son to be
know.
I told my
Yeah,
son to be quiet too. He's 16, so right now he's playing video games because I need to work with him when we're done, so I gave him some
yeah.
free time during this, but
I love that. Yeah, I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 17-month-old, and a 3-month-old. And
wow.
my
It's amazing you
5-year-old,
can get anything done.
thank you. I was gonna say my 5-year-old and 3-year-old are fighting about how to play in the dollhouse properly. So hopefully they're settled now, but the 3-year-old's a
No
little fussy,
worries.
or the 3-month-old is a little fussy, but he's going down for his nap, so he's just fighting it. But yeah, they're too funny. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about kind of what it's like to manage all of this. So, because you have 6 children total. Now, most of them at this point are out of the house. Is that correct? Or how many are still home with you?
So, yes, we have 6 kids. All of them were out of the house except for the youngest, who is
Mhm.
16, our son. And then our daughter last August, one of our middle daughter moved back home with us.
Mhm.
She had been working outside of Atlanta and, renting a room from a friend, and then that friend was getting married, and it was gonna be so expensive for her to be able to even pay half of a rent
Mhm.
for an apartment outside of Atlanta. So she
Yeah.
asked if she could move home, which we've allowed her to do, and she's
Mhm.
working on paying off some things and getting, you know, to the point where she can actually afford to have a place of her own. Uh,
Yeah.
so we have 2 in the house now, and, the other 4, 3 of them live locally and 1 lives out of state.
Mm.
And so we have 5 grandchildren and 1 on the way,
That's so
and
exciting.
we have our 3 oldest grandchildren every other week. We get them for the weekend, and
Mm.
then, our youngest grandchild, we have whenever she needs us to watch him, and then 1 is out of state. And
Yeah.
I am still teaching until I can get my business off the ground, so I teach 2 days a week,
Mhm.
and that's been a blessing because the college, even though it's only adjunct, this college has been flexible with me, which has been helpful. So my son is dual enrolling there,
Mhm.
and my husband works remotely. So what we do is we get up in the morning, excuse me, we drive about 45 minutes to where the college is. I go
Mhm.
to class and teach, my son goes to class. They've given my husband an office on campus where he is able to work while we're both in class, and then when we're done, we all come back home together. So, it's been working, which is nice, but I only get to teach public speaking, which
Mhm.
I've taught all of these years, so I obviously I know what I'm doing with it, but it's not what I enjoy teaching. I really enjoy teaching the
Yeah.
communicating and relationships. If I never had to grade another speech, I would be I would say, thank you, Lord," you know?
Yeah.
But God's been good in providing
Mhm.
for us, since
Yeah.
college where I was teaching closed, and, so yeah, I work as I can, and help my son homeschool, and then whatever my husband needs as he's working, and, it's a
Mhm.
busy life, but it works.
Yeah. Love that. And how has the communication, uh, field been able to help you in being a mom to all of these children and kind of navigating, how to build the life that you want with your family and with your children? And obviously they're a little bit older now that you're starting the entrepreneur journey, but I would imagine they've all got opinions on it, whether they're incredibly supportive or they think you're nuts, or so kind of how has all of that kind of worked together?
Well, I would say every one of them is supportive. My daughter, who's staying with
Yeah.
us at the house, has helped me with some of the social media stuff, which is not my
Mhm.
forte. My husband is super tech savvy, which is great because tech is also not my forte.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, even my youngest son has asked me, "Oh, how'd your podcast go? So they're all
Yeah.
very supportive. Um, some of them have had some struggles in their marriages, and I've
Mhm.
given them advice over the years. It's a little awkward to get advice from your parents. I mean, not to say that they don't ask us for advice, they do,
Mhm.
but I've talked to them about joining my program. Of course, they're my kids, I would let them to
Yeah.
join for free, but,
Yeah.
I don't know that they're ready to do something formally, although I do think it would benefit several of them.
Mhm.
So I give them more informal advice as they wanna take it. One thing when your children get older is
Mm.
you wanna be careful being too pushy in your
Mhm.
advice because they are adults and they're making their own decisions, and so whenever
Yeah.
they ask, I give it to them, and when they don't,
Yeah.
I do a lot of praying.
Yeah.
We had because of the way our situation was, well, let me back up. So a number of years ago, I was asked to do a Mother's Day, lesson at our church,
Mhm.
and I really felt like I was extremely unqualified because despite all of the experiences that I've had, I don't know that I would say, like, I'm a good mom. I know what being a mom is. I'm a good parent. I don't know that I would say all those things
Mhm.
because it's been very challenging. Not that it's not challenging other times, but just because of our situation where we had we had 3 kids one week, and then they weren't with us the next week, and we had very different home environments. So their
Mhm.
mother was not a Christian and had very different standards for them and different values. She loved them,
Mhm.
that was never an issue, but it was just they were going from one environment to a completely different environment every other week.
Yeah.
And so that led to a lot of struggles in their lives, and then, of course, with their mom being taken so violently, that's
Mhm.
led to a lot of trauma as well, and, what I learned from that situation was, first of all, when people are grieving, you have to be flexible to let them grieve any way they want. There's
Mhm.
there's no one way to grieve, and so to try to force anybody to grieve a certain way or not to grieve a certain way, this is something, I mean, we dealt with this almost immediately because, the youngest of the 3 children wanted to see her mom in the casket, and the 2
Mhm.
oldest did not. And we had people, on both sides of the family saying, "Oh, they all need to go in and see her," or, "Oh, no, she shouldn't go see her." And we were
Mhm.
like, we're letting them do what they feel like they need to do
Yeah.
because, we're not going to force anybody to do or not do anything in this situation. We, we don't know what they need. We're just trying to help them get some sense of stability and be able to keep moving on in this situation. So I
Yeah.
learned that specifically about grief to
Mm,
not to not really expect anything and just work through it, be there for them, work through it as they need help and can and try to
mm,
support them as best you can. I will say I have a good relationship with all of the children,
mhm,
and we've been able to make what I would say is a pretty successfully blended family. Something I hadn't added into my earlier discussion is that my husband's first wife and I were friends in high school.
mm,
So he had a crush on me in high school, and then after that, started dating my friend, and
mhm,
they ended up getting married and having kids, and that marriage didn't work out. And so once we ended up having grandchildren together, that put us in position where we were spending time together.
mm,
Now, so she's remarried and has 2 so they have 2 daughters together, but then she has 2 sons by her second marriage, and of course, we have
mhm,
1 son together in ours. Well, her youngest and our youngest are closer in age together than any of the other siblings, and
mm.
so when we started getting together, the 2 of them gravitated to each other and started hanging out together, and so they're friends, and my husband's first wife and I are friends, so we
Yeah.
actually go hang out together.
Yeah. I love that though. Like
And
that's to me, that's like the best case scenario. It's like my biological mom, my stepmom are like best friends. How could you get any better than that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny when we meet people and I'm introducing her, I just say, "This is my friend." I don't try to explain the connection because
Mhm.
nobody believes it. And but yeah, we get along great, and we'll go take our kids to the amusement park together or whatever, and just hang out and talk. And
Mhm.
so we've done a good job being able to make the blended family work.
Mhm.
Um, but looking back on some things, there's some things I can think, "Oh, I might have done this differently in hindsight," but
Mm.
we all know hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say the biggest thing that I did was pray my way through parenting
Yeah.
and ask God for a lot of wisdom, lots and
Mhm.
lots of wisdom, because even as much as I know about how to communicate in relationships, and this is one thing with parenting, this is one reason why I haven't decided to teach parents how to communicate. I can teach them general things, but with parenting, it's so different depending on every single child,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas with marriage, there are some unique aspects to different marriages. We have a lot of unique ones in ours, but the skills of how to communicate in marriage are going to be pretty much the same.
Mhm.
But how I tell you to communicate with a child is gonna be different depending on that specific child, and
Mm.
every single child is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say it's very hard to develop a program that you can apply to everybody. I think that, especially just based on communication, I think there are other factors you could incorporate into that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that that's so true. It's like, communication looks different across all these different frameworks, right? And like you said, it's like communication between a husband and wife is very different between parents and children. And, there's also that level of as, husband and wife, you're both partners in it, and with children, there's a level of partnership. You obviously want them to have some, some say in what happens, but the overall, like, my way, like I'm the parent, like I'm the
Yeah,
one that's guiding you, whereas as spouses, it's more along the lines of like, here's how I'm feeling, these are the things that I'm seeing, like let's have a discussion and figure this out together. You and me versus the problem. And
right.
you
Right,
know
yeah, and we had just had an issue with our son, and that's the same thing. My husband and I are like, "Okay, how are we going to deal with this issue, and what is the best way?" And we actually
yeah.
haven't reached a resolution yet because we're taking some time to think and to pray, and figure that out. But as you say, yes, I can adapt how I communicate with my son, um,
Mhm.
based on certain things, but ultimately he needs to obey, he needs to be
Mhm.
respectful. Those are things that you can't let go and just let them. In fact, I tell my son all the time,
Mm.
it seems to children that your parents love you if they let you do what you want and let you
Mm.
go your way. But that is the most unloving thing that any parent can do. Yes,
Yeah.
it makes life easy for me, and the child thinks it makes life easy for them because they're happy. But
Right.
I
Yeah.
am doing them a great disservice if I
Mhm.
give them what they want instead of being a parent and doing the hard thing, which is teaching them right from wrong, teaching them to
Yeah.
be responsible, teaching them to be consistent, teaching them to be kind, to be loving, to think of others, to value others more highly than yourself. All of those are things that they need if they're going to be able to function in life.
Mhm.
And the process of teaching that to them and getting them to apply it is where the pain comes in. But
Mhm.
that's also where I'm communicating love to you because I
Yeah.
want what's best for you.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess just one more point before we start to wrap everything up. Um, so obviously, I'm assuming you and your husband just have the best relationship in the world since
No.
you've and I was gonna say, I mean, so your husband's been divorced twice before, and you guys are successfully, married and happy, and have a good solid relationship. Do you feel that your communication skills really tailored to that and allowed for this to be successful? Because obviously I don't want to sound harsh because obviously I don't know the specific situations, but he had two failed marriages before that. So were there things that had to change on his level that you were able to get him to? Or would you say that, the level of communication that you were able to bring to the table really helped facilitate things in a way that led to success?
Yes. So I would say it was both. Um,
Mhm.
I think that my knowledge of communication and being able to apply that was definitely helpful.
Mhm.
And there were some things that I had to teach him about
Mhm.
communicating based on what was happening in the past. But um, a large component of it was God's impact in his life. He
Mhm.
had been raised in church, but had gone his own way, and it took God bringing him to a low point for him to decide to come back. And
Mhm.
once God got involved in the picture, that changed his desire, which then, of course, changed his actions to
Mhm.
ones that would be more in line to having a conducive marriage than what he had in the 2 before. Now, I mean, there were issues on both sides in the previous marriages. So, yes,
Mhm.
there was some baggage and there were some things that we've had to work through communication, through my understanding of him, through his understanding of himself, so that
Mhm.
we can what my goal is in my business is to help people get communication healthy in their marriage. I'm using
Mhm.
the term healthy.
Yeah.
So I would say we have a healthy marriage. I would say it is satisfying and fulfilling mostly, obviously not all the time because no marriage is perfect. But
Mhm.
just like when you think about a physical body, when you're healthy, things can happen. You can get a cold, for example, but you're going to get over it much faster than if you
Yeah.
have a body that's already sick. Right?
Yeah.
So if you're doing the things to take care of your body, you're watching what you eat, you're exercising, you're getting enough water, you're getting enough sleep, your body can deal with the other things. Then if you're not doing all of those things to try to take care of it, even small things like a cold can turn into something major like pneumonia because your body is not healthy. So that's my goal. I would say we do have a healthy marriage and communication has played a huge role in that. My husband would say the same thing.
Mhm.
But as far as getting his life turned around from what it was, that was all God,
Mhm.
and I can't take any credit for that.
Yeah. No, I love that though. It's, that coming to God story where, when you put God at the root of all things, he makes what seems impossible possible, right? You know. So I love that. So if people were looking for help in their marriage and to look at some of the offers that you're doing and even the workshop that you have coming up, where can they find you?
My website is thecommunicationdoc, So thecommunicationdoc.com.
Mhm.
And there's a free masterclass that anyone who goes there can access. It's called Overcoming Four Thoughts That Will Destroy Your Marriage. And
Mhm.
what I did in this masterclass was address four very common thoughts we have in marriage that,
Mhm.
if you allow yourself to continue to dwell on them, will wreak havoc on your marriage. And so,
Mhm.
in addition to talking about the thoughts and why we have them, I go through specific steps you can do to help address the issues that are underlying those thoughts. Because some people might think, well, for example, one of them just quickly is, my
Mhm.
spouse isn't living up to my expectations. Well, we gotta be careful with our expectations, right? But
Mhm.
at the same time, there are some expectations we should have in marriage.
Yeah.
So, there are some things that if your spouse is not doing need to be changed, and so I don't want to come across like, "Oh, you should just accept anything and be happy and it's
Mhm.
okay and ignore problems," because that's not my goal either. So I give
Mhm.
specific steps on if there are issues. Once you've addressed your thinking, if there are issues, how specifically step by step do you address it? And
Mhm.
so if you join the masterclass, you'll be able to get access to it, and that will also put you on my email list, and then I'll send you the workbook that goes along with the masterclass. And then on my website as well, it talks about my group program, which is Get Communication Healthy in Your Marriage. And so
Mhm.
you can learn more about that as well. And then the program that the mini course I'm going to be launching, I mentioned earlier, the One Simple Truth to Sustain Your Marriage Through Holiday Stress. This
Mhm.
is like a first step to get you working towards getting a healthy marriage. And especially
Mhm.
as we head into the holidays and the stress that comes along with that, these truths are very simple and they're going to help you be able to deal with those extra things that happen during the holiday and kind of put
Mhm.
you on the road towards a healthy marriage. For some people, it may be all you need, but for some
Yeah.
people, it will at least be the first step. And that will come out on December 1st. And so if you
Mhm.
go to my website, you'll be on my email list and then you'll receive notification about that as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
And,
Michelle. I
we'll make
appreciate
sure
you
we
having
put all
me.
those. Yeah, absolutely, and we'll make sure we put all those links in the description as well. And so thank you.
Thank you.